plan to join us. So we'll get
Great.
started because I know you have a hard stop
Mhm.
at just before noon. So good morning, everybody. Callie, you started the recording? Okay, perfect. So I am calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It is 11:15 on July 31st, 2024, and I'm Barbara Neal. As a reminder, the meeting's being recorded. The recording will be posted to the task force webpage after the meeting. Let's start with a roll call of task force members. Please verbally acknowledge your presence when I call your name. So we'll start with Jen Morrison.
I'm here.
Paul White, good morning.
Good morning, I'm present.
Thank you. Mike Dunges.
I am here.
Ron Kumitz.
I am also here.
Morning. And Jim Mack.
I'm here.
Hey, good morning.
Barb,
right.
is there some reason? Barb, is there a reason we didn't get a message that the recording has started? Callie, we normally, it's announced across the.
It's showing on the screen.
Yeah, I saw it pop up.
It's showing on my screen.
Okay, well, the audio warning didn't come out. That's okay. I'll trust that.
All right, we're going to move on. All right, also joining us today is Callie Audette as our administrative support, and our project management team, Rick and Dom from Televate. And also on the line is Liz Tracy, who will be talking to us in a few minutes about some of her work. I see Michael Wright has just joined. Good morning, Michael.
Morning.
All right, so that looks like we have all task force members accounted for this morning. Let's see, who did I miss? For our usuals, we also have, looks to be, it is Stephen Whitaker joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself, Stephen?
No.
All righty. Okay. Moving on then to approval of the agenda. So I'm going to make a request, or Jen, go ahead.
Oh, perfect. I was just going to probably make the same request you were going to change the order that as immediately following approval of the minutes, that we move up our guest presenter, and then the next item, which is discussion of tell me, I only have one screen, so I don't have the agenda in front of me.
The regional town hall community listening session discussion.
That we move up our guest speaker and the discussion about the regional town hall listening sessions to immediately after approval of the agenda minutes, excuse me, and then we follow that up and pick back up with the agenda at public comment and play through the rest of it.
Okay, and you're right, that was going to be exactly my request. Any other proposed changes to the agenda? Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda with the changes discussed?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Second? Any other discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the agenda as discussed, raise your hand or indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Ron. I see all other task force members' hands are raised, so the changes to the agenda are approved. And we will move on then to approval of the minutes from the July 10th regular meeting. That's regular meeting number 29. Are there any changes needed to these minutes? Okay.
I will make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
Thank you, Ron.
Seconded.
Thank you, Jim. Any discussion?
Madam Co-Chair, I will be abstaining since I wasn't there and I have not had a chance to review the recording or the minutes, so I don't know what happened.
Okay, thanks, Paul. All right, all in favor then raise your hand or indicate by saying aye. I see all the task force members' hands are up except Paul's, who's going to abstain. All right. The minutes are approved from July 10th. So with that, let's move on to the reorganized agenda. First up is the statewide dispatch training group overview. I'd like to introduce my longtime colleague, Liz Tracy, who's here to discuss her work that has occurred literally over many decades a couple of decades, right, Liz? To advance minimum training requirements for dispatchers in Vermont and provide training opportunities to all dispatchers in Vermont, while also supporting wellness initiatives and advancing other issues critical to the emergency communications profession. I asked Liz to come today to provide an overview of that work and to ensure that her experienced voice is heard at this table. So welcome, Liz. Thanks for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me, or am I muted?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. As Barb said, my name is Liz Tracy, and I have about 43 plus years dispatch experience, call taking, supervising, as well as training coordinator, with the majority of that time being spent with state police until I retired, and now working again full-time with Middlebury Police Department. So over the years, we've done many committees, we've tried associations, we did meet with the legislators at one point, they did a site visit. We were trying to get some sort of standardized training, because as of right now, with the 7-digit line, there's no mandatory training other than the federal NCIC, which actually allows us to run motor vehicle and criminal record checks. Other than that, the training is pretty much done on the job. Usually you sit with an experienced dispatcher who may or may not be a great dispatcher, but have been around the longest, so they are usually the ones utilized. The Academy had been on board with a lot of this and still is. So basically what it is a group of us that got together years ago and said, hey, we need to do something. And that's where we started with an association that met a couple of times, but as many things happen, they get started and then they go away, or somebody moves on, or something happens. But the ultimate goal of the small group that I work with is that we would like to have some sort of standard and mandatory training for dispatchers, similar to what they have for 911 call takers. So anything that we can do to try to get that message out there and get the ball rolling. We did meet several years ago with the chief of police and did a presentation, like a 3-phase type of academy, basic school, and following what the sworn members do, which is a field training officer program, and then having more on-the-job formal training. That, again, got so far and then stopped. So everything is kind of like started and stopped numerous times, and I'm trying to get that back again, mainly a little bit selfishly on my part, because I hadn't dispatched full-time in a while, and going back to Middlebury Police, I found that, gosh, I needed a refresher. So we, myself and others, started back up doing basic dispatch school, and then providing training around the state on various topics, whatever somebody else needs. We would try to facilitate that or instruct ourselves. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. If you need more information than that, I can certainly go back and give you a better timeline of when everything actually started. I know the first phase of dispatch school that I did with the Academy was back in 1995. And since then, we've had several versions of one. And with consolidation of state police, that kind of took away the state-wide basic, and we continue to adjust with state police dispatchers, and then brought it back again statewide after that first couple of consolidations. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Liz. So just to be clear, that in my understanding, so your basic dispatch course is still being offered. Is that right?
Yes, it is. We're actually scheduling one for October. We did a mini one back in April with a few dispatchers. So
Yep.
we did try over the years, and Barb, you probably remember this too, is combining 911, their 40-hour with a statewide basic, because a lot of the requirements or dispatching is the same no matter what you're doing. You're getting the who, what, when, where, why, how, weapons, hazards, and all those other things. And then what we had done before was a couple of days were the basics of call taking, and then we would get into 911 would be separate because obviously they have to follow their protocol and the books, where 7-digit, it's not a requirement to follow the books, meaning the APCO books or PowerPhone books, or the 911
Right.
books now.
Right. Okay, yes, and I certainly do remember that. Question, Jen, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, hi Liz. Thank you obviously for your many decades of service and for striving to build consistency and professionalization in this field. As with many things that are initiatives across the state, there tend to be common themes of resistance, and then there tend to be common themes of agreement with a statewide training or statewide operational protocols, et cetera. And I wonder just if you have any sort of top of mind, what would be the biggest hurdles to getting this statewide training and consistency across all dispatching entities, and what would be the most compelling reasons for it?
I think the biggest hurdle is just getting the message out to all the dispatchers that there is an opportunity for these trainings. And then, of course, we run into staffing issues where to make it mandatory is kind of hard for smaller departments that may not have the extra people to come in and cover dispatch. When we first started talking about it, like I said, the Academy has been on board since day one, and then getting the legislators involved so that they realize that, hey, we want to standardize. So that might be one of the hurdles to come about now. I think when we was Jessica Ebenhauser, when she was killed in Rutland, that really brought back a lot of, no matter what door you go through, dispatching is the same. And there were several dispatchers from various agencies that went to Rutland City to cover dispatch. And that was like, okay, we really do need to have some sort of standardization, and getting the chiefs on board, getting the sheriffs on board, getting, state police command staff on board, that everybody should be the same. That might be one of the hurdles as well.
Can I ask you if you're thinking about a certification process for dispatchers, or just like this is the base level of training? It might be, potato, but if it was a certification process, we'd have to have the Criminal Justice Council on board with this, not just hosting training, but maintaining compliance and stuff like that. So I'm wondering, are you thinking about that certification, or just, hey, this is what you should do in your first X years of dispatching?
We would like to see the certification, and that was the one presentation that we did to the chiefs and to the training council back in, I think it was the 90s. We did that 3-phase to follow along, kind of like with the the part-time officers, the different levels. So we were following along with that, and then that's where the CTO program came in. Sarah Ferris, actually from 911, and myself went to San Jose, learned how to do the trainer piece, brought that back to the Academy, and I believe at this point, Michelle, that took my place at State Police, is still continuing on with that. So the thought was, yes, we would do a certification, and there was actually one class that we did when I was with the training division and kept in keep with my boss, we did a certification then. But again, that's something that just kind of like fell by the wayside, or the dispatchers that were involved ended up leaving or moved on to be a supervisor or something along that line. So we didn't continue it. But a certification, I think, would be great. That would put us on board with other states that have those certifications. And I believe at this point, the Academy would be on board with us doing that as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
The other piece, there's a critical testing that is what I used to administer for applicants for state police dispatch, but I would also do it for outside agencies. And I talked to Ken at the Academy about them purchasing it and being able to administer that. So really raising the bar for dispatchers that answer the 7-digit line. Obviously, it's continuing for the 911 portion of it too, but really having a standardized hiring process where everybody would do this critical test. From there, they would go to the Academy for the certification, and then follow through with a CTO program, a formalized CTO program, which I'm sure a lot of agencies have their own variation of the training program, but to actually have one similar to what the sworn members go through.
Great. Are there other questions for Liz? Okay. If task force members do come up with other questions, you can certainly let me know, and Liz and I talk often, so I can get them to her or invite her back. Liz, I really appreciate you coming in. I know you're traveling, and I appreciate you taking the time today to tell us about the work you've done, and we may come back to you with more questions. I know I'm looking forward to, as a result of the task force work and our consultants' work, seeing robust ideas, plans for improving or setting a baseline even for dispatcher training and certification requirements in a future system of statewide dispatch operations. So thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, and you're certainly welcome to hang on as we move along through the agenda, but understand if you need to disconnect as well. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Moving on then to, well, let me see, is there any other discussion on the statewide dispatch topic, or are we ready to move on?
I would just note that we should probably be keeping a list of potential statutory requests, right? If this is going to become a statutorily mandated certification, or if this would just be a best practice, a recommended thing. But as we go through and continue to hear from people with knowledge in the field, and hear about things that are best practices or aspirations for best practices, we ought to be keeping a list of things that either would require a statutory fix, or in this case, a partnership with the Criminal Justice Council for a certification process, et cetera, et cetera. So is that, Rick and Dom, is that a list that you guys are able to keep, or should we put a shared document and just copy and paste items out of the meeting minutes as they become known to us?
That's certainly something we can keep a list of as well. Yes.
So, Jen,
Great.
can you build on what we would need to do to get the certification to get statutory requirements, so that we also, just don't list it, but perhaps, provide some, here's what we have to do to get it done?
We can talk about it offline just in the interest of
All right.
time, but I would think
Sure.
that for now, just capturing the list. And then as we get closer to hearing what MCP's recommendations are, that we are able to take into consideration things that the task force has identified in addition to whatever they come up with, and then we can build out those details when we get much closer to what the final state might look like, or what the options are that we put out for feedback.
Understood. Makes sense.
Yeah. And I think there's room for discussion too. I don't know, like, for example, the 911 board is the entity that certifies 911 call takers in Vermont. We don't have any sort of relationship with the criminal justice. Well, we do have a relationship with the Criminal Justice Training Council, but not in that, not for certifications. Maybe there are particulars about dispatch operations that might require their involvement, but it could also be, I think, whatever entity is charged with oversight of a statewide public safety communications system that could be responsible for that. So anyway, just a thought.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but I think there's room for a lot more discussion on this to understand the ins and outs. Okay. Ready to move on, Jen? Okay. So next up on the agenda is a discussion of the regional town hall and community listening sessions that are planned as part of Mission Critical's work. So Jen and I have had some discussions with Mission Critical about the planning for these events. Just some basic introductory info here. The regional town hall sessions are meant to provide an opportunity for various stakeholders to identify challenges and opportunities for increased efficiency in the dispatch function. The target audience for regional town halls would be local state officials, select boards, town officials, state legislators, EMS and fire, both volunteer and career, law enforcement, and communications center leadership. So the plan from Mission Critical is to provide up to 4 in-person meetings around the state. Jen has already proposed that those be set up, in a geographically diverse fashion, northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast type fashion. So that's one component, and the other component is these community listening sessions, similar to town halls, but a broader audience of community members to allow them to identify their concerns and expectations. And that's proposed to be a hybrid of in-person and remote options, perhaps in the north central, south central part of the states. So right now, the plan is to have these meetings the week of September 9th to 13th. And we are looking for input from task force members on things we need to be considering as we plan these events. So I've kind of set it up here. We can, I'll open up the floor for input, questions, thoughts on these 2 components.
Are you talking about both the town halls and the listening sessions both taking place during that week?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Was that the plan?
No, I don't think so. I
Okay.
think I really wish I was not working off one screen, but I identified some regions where we could find a sufficient facility that could host, dozens and dozens of people who might come, and trying to make it accessible no matter what part of the state you're in. Now, I do have to say the events of the last couple of days might change some of my choices because of road closures.
Right.
But the idea would be to get the details of these events locked down and get MCP's travel locked down, and get the word out to all of those, the intended target audience, probably next week, at the latest the following week, to give folks time to plan to participate. As in addition to planning the logistics of the where and the when, we need to put together probably a small group of task force members to talk about the what. MCP obviously is guiding this process, and they have a very clear vision of the what, but I want to make sure that the local Vermont perspective is fleshed out too before we roll into one of these meetings and say, oh, wait, but aren't you going to ask about? So I think there's two things. One, we will circulate to the group in writing what the draft proposal is for the when and the where. And we will do that as soon as possible. In fact, I'd like to be able to do that before the end of the week, Barb. I don't know if you feel like we can do that. And then
yeah,
try
I'm
to
not
put
sure.
together a small group of 3. That doesn't include me. I just want to be really clear. So 3 members of the task force, not including Jen, to help work with MCP on the what. Circulate the when and where. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think so. And my second question was, maybe this is a question for MCP, but I don't know. What are we going to direct them? Are there going to be some after hours meetings included, or is it all going to be daytime stuff?
I think
That,
we
I
agreed
think,
that they
is-
have to be in the evening.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, at least some of them.
Yep.
So, I think then what we're looking for is volunteers.
Small group, 3.
Free. Well, I can certainly be part of it.
Let me just say this. We're going to need to divide and conquer here. There's going to be a team that has to work on the when and the where and the logistics of getting with the host agency, communicating and saying, this is what we're doing. You know, we'll bring the bottled water, getting the word out. So I will take responsibility for that if somebody wants to be my helper with that. And then this other group, small group, is to work with MCP and advise on content of the event. So it sounds like that's Barb. Who wants to be on team Barb? Who wants to be on team Jen? Let's go. Pick sides. Don't be the last kid picked.
Oh, come on, we can do it like kickball.
So I can certainly
I'll
help
pick Team
advise on
Barb.
Yeah, I'm
Team
sorry,
Barb,
and I can
Jim?
help advise
All
on
right.
content too. Yeah.
Jim and
Team
Mike
Barb
D.
is
Got
well.
it.
Sorry,
Jim
Jen.
and
I'd
Mike
love to
on
hang out with you,
content.
but
Don't mind. It's okay. I'd pick Barb too.
logistics are just tough, right? with us.
Logistics are tough. Paul, you want to be on team Jen?
I don't want to commit to something I can't fulfill, but by September, right now, as you know,
You're-
if it was this week or next, there's no way I could do it, but by September, I should be able to
Have
help
some
with Team
breathing
Jen.
room.
Yeah.
All right. We'll stick with that for now. And that means that Ron and the other Mike, you guys get a hall pass for this go round, but don't worry. I'll keep
We'll be
I'll
back.
keep a list. We'll be back. Okay, so Barb and I are going to seek, and Callie, this would be great for you to highlight in the draft minutes so that it's a reminder. We're going to seek to circulate the draft plan of the where and the when by the end of the week to you guys. And that then you can give us, we can have feedback on that, and we will let Rants know about the team to help advise on content.
Right. And I
And,
will
um,
call
um,
on Televate to help with our content discussion as well.
No, that's
think
fine,
that would
Carl.
be
I'm just gonna offer, our help, to however, we can best, help out.
Hey, great,
Yeah, we can carry the water too.
excellent.
So what you're hearing
Okay,
is
good.
Televate's trying to be Switzerland. They want to be on both teams.
I imagine they will
No
be. I think
favorites.
that's a given. Yes. All right. Fair enough. Okay, I think we know where we're going with this then for now, and we'll keep moving forward here with the next agenda item if we're ready to move on. Okay. So next up is public comment. We would like to keep public comment in total to 10 minutes or less. I do see that we have a guest. Jeff Burnham has joined us. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself, and do you have anything for public comment today?
Hi, Jeff Burnham, Springfield Police Chief. Nothing to comment, just listening, trying to keep up to speed with what's going on. We have a dispatch center, and I just want to see how the big picture is going to affect us. So that's just me listening in.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us. Stephen, do you have any public comment or any comment for today?
I do.
Okay.
And this was crafted last week in the absence of a meeting that I was pent up. Ironically, effective public participation is the first order of business when addressing a bottom-up, locally owned and managed public safety communications framework. And the task force is still unable to conduct a meeting for lack of a quorum. I think that's the second or third time. This issue has been raised as part of prior efforts to expand the task force to include more than 7 people, specifically including some county level folk, and to allow the task force to elect its own chair and therefore set its own agenda that includes topics which inspire engagement and the priorities of the task force members rather than just those of the conflicted co-chairs. These issues were also raised in arguments in legislative committee and proposed amendments on the Senate floor, and yet were rebutted with specious claims such as the task force has plenty of participation and has never had any difficulty achieving a quorum for meetings. Effective public participation is also a requirement of Vermont statutes addressing telecommunications planning as set forth in 30 VSA 202D. This is telecommunications planning we are doing, and there's no way to avoid that reality. Second item of business is our system's vulnerability. The recent report released by the FCC details the nationwide AT&T outage in February, which included FirstNet outage, resulted in 25,000 blocked 911 calls and 91 million blocked cellular calls. For the state to have put its eggs in one basket and forfeited 25 million in cash and 30 million in spectrum to one carrier who has not delivered on what they promised, and yet we have not even discussed a contingency plan of alternatives, is dereliction of duty, I would argue, on behalf of this task force. The recent CrowdStrike update of a configuration file resulting in worldwide disruption, which included some PSAPs, airline and banking outages, and most systems based on Microsoft's operating system's inability to handle a misconfigured file and lack of a revert to last known good configuration process. The AT&T data breach, which is now reported to have included 70 million customer records, revealing not only the phone numbers of the subscribers, but of all of the telephone numbers, which numbers had been called from those numbers and who had called those numbers, including sensitive phone numbers of high-level government officials, emergency response officials, confidential informants, etc. A damage assessment is necessary here. And the fact that this data also included FirstNet subscribers and that the AT&T FirstNet outage unequivocally exposed the fraud of AT&T's claims that FirstNet is a standalone separate network and engineered to be unbreakable. Thirdly, congressionally directed spending. We've yet to see any plans that meet statutory requirements under 3 VSA 3303, nor an RFP for an independent review contract as required under that same section, or a Plan B. I'll note for clarity that the ADS contract with the former consultant to the COPS office in no way met the statutory requirements for an independent review, and yet time is clicking away and no independent review has been conducted of the IT activities embodied in this proposed CDS spending. Or Plan B, should the feds realize that most of the proposed expenditures under the Department of Public Safety's incomplete plan are not demonstrably in support of a, quote, transition to statewide regional emergency communication, as is the explicit congressional intent for the spending. Integrated planning for other congressionally directed spending beneficiaries. Windsor County Sheriff has $1.24 million. Washington County Firefighters has a pending request. I believe it's in the, still in, not passed by Congress, for an earmark for a new radio system. But that radio system had not considered trunk radio, which the state has specified as a statewide goal, nor had it considered LTE integration. Bradford, I think that's Bradford, Windham County. I think Bradford is a mistake. It's another town over in western Vermont that got another earmark. The task force should be discussing whether to use some of the 11 million in general funds that's with its currently contracted engineering support for Mission Critical to support integrated planning for both LMR and LTE for these early CDS funded projects to assure that the most efficient, resilient, and cost-effective cellular and LMR coverage is completed as part of these designs. That would, in effect, make sure they get on the same page and serve in a different manner as pilot projects for integrated planning. The 10-year telecommunications plan draft specifically elaborates on the need to use public funds to accomplish cellular infill in areas of Vermont which still lack coverage, and in so doing could create failover for emergency LTE broadband communications for use by first responders, because FirstNet will fail again and many departments are not going to sign up with FirstNet. This should be accomplished through a neutral host all carriers model, which also a requirement for analysis as part of the 10-year telecommunications plan. The statewide communications interoperability plan is way out of date and was never completed to its requirements, but yet it cannot be held hostage for the Department of Public Safety's request for additional funding, when both the Public Service Department and the Department of Public Safety are required to complete these plans within existing budgets. They can't just say, we're not going to do it until you cough up some more money. And that's in effect what's represented in the 10-year telecommunications plan as the Department of Public Safety's stance, that they're not going to do the interoperability plan unless somebody coughs up some more money. What are our current resilience capabilities, and why aren't these a priority of this discussion of this task force? Where do existing systems lack redundancy of connectivity, be it media diverse microwave for fiber or fiber diverse routes? Which dispatch centers are capable and equipped for failover should either go offline due to either staffing, storms, hurricanes, or technical reasons? Which dispatch centers have both radio transmission interoperability and the computer dispatching capability to immediately handle not only their own traffic, but traffic for a failed dispatch center nearby? These are the questions that the task force should be discussing in depth and setting as priorities with an aggressive timeline to address these issues. The failure of the task force to obtain its own legal counsel to promote and support formation of regional governance, which will own and manage these radio systems, as well as timely, prompt, transparent public records access requests, including how the data being gathered now by mission critical partners as to the capabilities and inadequacies of current communication systems is to be shared, is necessary to be consistent with the 10-year telecommunications plan statutes. All of these are needed to build broad support for the necessary funding mechanisms, as you can't effectively argue for funding for something you can't understand or aren't privy to the details of. And I believe that today's discussion about training standards drove home the same point, that we have yet to begin talking about either regional governance or statewide governance. And this task force is falling far short of those responsibilities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I think I've invited everyone, but just to be sure, is there anyone else that has any public comment for today? Okay, great. And I'll note that Jen Morrison did drop off the call. She had a commitment at noon. Moving on then to project updates. Let's move to Dom.
Thank you, Barb, and good morning, task force members. I'll give a brief update as to where we are in the project. I'll display the schedule here, the timeline schedule, so that they'll help me with my status update. And just a little bit of preface, this is a bit dated, as this was prepared for last week, of course, which we had the meeting delayed until this week. So this shows status as of July 22nd. This will be updated in a few days for the next week's update. But currently, we are moving along essentially on schedule. The one task that has been delayed was the receipt of the completed questionnaires that were distributed in June. We are still continuing to receive completed questionnaires, though. While this particular task has taken longer than anticipated, it is not holding up the rest of the project. We have received good input from those questionnaires we have received, and we are still progressing with the on-site dispatch center visits. Those continue. This shows as of the July 22nd date, we had completed a total of 5 of those. So just starting, 5 out of 38. Those have continued. They continued last week. They are continuing this week and are anticipated to continue until the middle of August, when we anticipate finishing those. So the schedule for the on-site visits was complete, and those on-site visits are in process now. Also, MCP began on-site visits for the wireless facilities portion to gather as much information as possible about existing LMR systems throughout the state. Those meetings started this week, where MCP met with Radio Technology Services to get information from the state on the systems that the state manages, as well as their support for local agencies. We have also met with a couple of the larger radio shops in the state, Burlington Communications and Radio North, and they both have been very helpful, providing some information as to what systems they support. And we are trying to gather the specific information about those systems in detail. Part of MCP's scope is to identify the existing coverage from the current wireless systems so that they can identify where gaps exist. So that work is ongoing. We have realized and of course been told how complex this system is. There are many number of different systems utilized throughout the state. As we know, there's 38 dispatch centers. Some of them dispatch for multiple agencies, could be 10 or 15 or even more agencies. And in some cases, each agency has their own channel or their own system that is used for dispatch. So gathering of that data, as I mentioned, is ongoing, but will be quite extensive. But that is continuing, and I mentioned that will continue into the next phase as well. Over the last period, Televate delivered the July stakeholder update. And we for those of you, hopefully you've seen, there was a revision to that came out shortly after. We did get some input from Michael Wright on that. We appreciate that. And we updated that data for the July stakeholder update. We'll begin work on the August very shortly. We also got together with the task force chair to discuss the protection and for the collection of the system data that we are collecting, just to alleviate any potential concerns with either the radio shops or the owner agencies. So that data will be gathered strictly for use with this project, and it will be kept confidential. And when a report is developed, the public report will provide a summary of that data that was collected, but the specifics will not be shared. And I think, as I mentioned, next phase, we're going to continue the dispatch center visits, continue compiling data for the wireless systems, and also begin the on-site evaluation of those systems. And as Barb and Jen discussed earlier, put together plans for the upcoming town halls. One more thing on the schedule. The analysis of the data that we will be gathering is expected to start there, we show in the middle of August. And then that continuing, that'll be enhanced as well by the town hall data that we get. And we're still on schedule for developing a draft report with some options, system design options, in the November-December timeframe. That's my update for this week. Happy to answer any questions from task force members.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Are there any questions? Mike?
I see one from Mike.
Yeah, so just the delay in the one delay that you have in getting those filled out questionnaires back, that's, if I understand correctly, that's just due to response time from the organizations that you sent the questionnaires to, right? It's you're on top of them, you're checking in, it's just them getting the data gathered and sent back to you. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. For those that we have not received the questionnaires, when we visit them on site, we'll be going over that data to confirm the data that we need. We'll gather it on site essentially.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate it.
So if I could add to what Dom just shared, Mike, there were a couple of facilities that complained about it and wondered why we were doing this and what benefit it was. And so there were good conversations held with those individuals, and they came back and completed their forms. So whenever we encounter a known issue of why they're not completing the form, we talk to them directly, and some of that is going to also be followed up on site when they visit to help fill out the form. Some folks have indicated that they just don't have time right now. They don't have the resources. So Mission Critical is going to go over the forms and complete them on site. So, whatever we know, and each one of these that haven't been responded to, MCP has reached out to them, and they're engaged in trying to expedite getting completion of the forms and the data.
Great. Any other questions for Rick or Dom?
Barb, could I ask a question? How come the task force didn't have a discussion about this confidentiality of all this data being collected? Well, that's not their purview to decide with the chairs. This is a core.
Let me take your question back to Jen offline. I think really it's just a matter of getting legal input on what's confidential and not. So I'll take it back to Jen, Stephen. Okay, moving on. Any other questions from task force for Televate? Okay. We don't have mission critical partners here today, but I feel that Dom's update gives us a pretty clear picture of what they're up to out there in the world. So we'll
Okay.
move on if there's no other questions. Or Dom, did you have more to add?
Well, just for information, Rance is on site this week. He's part of the dispatch center team, so that's what he's tied up with.
Yeah, and Scott is also on site, meeting dispatch radio shops, and we've been getting engaged in meetings with them, identifying not only, what new investments and enhancements are being made so that they can be aware, we're aware of them, to be included in the program, but to gain insight, additional insights. And those conversations with the state and with 2 local radio shops have been very valuable, have provided us insights that, will certainly support the development of recommendations and will fill in missing gaps that might not be available from the operators, the public safety operator network, radio network operators themselves.
Okay. Great. All right. If we are ready to move on, we will go to new business. Do task force members have any new business for today? Great. Hearing nothing. We'll confirm the next meeting date and adjourn. So we got off schedule a little bit with moving last week's meeting to today. My recommendation is we just pick up again next week and continue with the every 2-week cadence. I know in my case, my calendar's like set for months with the schedule that's already on the books. So anybody object to that? Okay. All right, then. So that means that our next meeting is set for August 7th at 11:15. That's next Wednesday. And if we're through, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll move we adjourn.
So moves.
Second.
Callie, I'll let you straighten that out. Okay. All in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand or indicate by saying aye. I see all
Aye.
task force members' hands are up, and thank you, Ron. Okay, we are adjourned for today. Thank you very much, everybody. And we will talk to you next week.
See you next week.
Have a good one.
Thank you all.
Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy.
Bye-bye.